you're running both a workshop and doing a presentation.
That's right.
That's an awful lot to take on.
Sure. Well, it kind of seemed like a good idea at the time.
And
I'm not the only person doing both the workshop and the presentation.
That is true. That is very true. And so your workshop is testing from zero to hero.
Yes. So we're going to be going over from the basics of testing right through to hopefully running through a small application from the ground up, as it were. A lot of the participants seem to be mid-level developers or above already, so I'm not sure how much basic stuff we'll need to do, but we'll take it as it goes.
So, in terms of testing and educating around testing, do you think, while it's a cultural thing to test, do you think it's something that we necessarily as a community do well?
No, there's a lot of cargo culting where people just grab what they see on a blog post and copy and paste it, and they don't think about the tests that they're actually writing. They do horrible things in the name of test-driven development, which realistically they're just copy and pasting from one thing to another. It's just like how you get bad Rails code, you get bad tests. People don't always think things through. So there's kind of one thing I want to do is try and encourage people to think about the tests they're writing and whether they need those tests, and try to encourage them to do some better design with their tests.
How much do you think tests are just a box we tick?
For some people, I think they are. I think some people, they get told, oh, you need to be doing testing. I think those people are the ones most likely to try and do copy and paste and cargo culting. And they'll do something, they'll write a test for a controller test where it gets the index and just assert that the response is okay, and it's just copy and pasted. And then they go away and hack away in the controller. If the test fails, I need to fix that page. But they don't really think about the test case they're writing and don't think about the edge cases and what actually could go wrong. That's kind of a problem. There are a lot of people who write tests as a method of design, and those people do it very well, but I think we've got a big divide between the two.
I definitely found in my progression in testing, there was a kind of uncomfortable place where I felt like my tastes for testing was greater than my ability to write good tests. Do you see that with people?
Yeah, I mean, you see all sort of swings and roundabouts when it comes to things. The most common failure is people doing stupid things like setting up recursion in their tests, and they've not really thought about what they're doing. They've gone, oh, I'm using some syntactic sugar, so I won't actually think about the Ruby I'm writing. And then they come and say, oh, I've found a bug, I've got a seg fault. And it's like, well, actually, no, you've actually written recursion there. You've not thought about what's actually going on. You just copied and pasted it from somewhere. You can't think about it. And then you see people slowly sort of get towards the pain point where they've got slow tests. So they apply a band-aid, like putting Zeus or Spork on top to speed up their output time so their tests run faster. They don't really think, well, why are my tests slow in the first place? Am I testing the right thing? And they'll just go all the way through controllers, and they'll never think about, well, I could extract that to a class and I could test that class and it might be faster. They just don't think about things through clearly.
So how do we as a community start to get better and help others get better at testing?
We need to encourage people to think about what they're writing, and I think that in part means doing practicals like the workshops or code retreats or other things that are encouraging you to put your work down and have a play with this code and actually try and work through the problems and isolate bits of code and extract them and actually learn the refactoring part of test-driven development and not just the red, green, red, green. Learn that they're not just something that's stopping you from releasing code or not just something that's allowing you to go make a cup of coffee while they run, but actually a tool to be used to improve your development.
Now, looking more towards your presentation, that's obviously come from your work with RSpec, but is probably a bit more than that.
Yeah, it talks about open source maintenance, really. I mean, I've been working on RSpec for the past year or so, helping and others in the community make our tool better, helping write my own code to improve the tool, just generally trying to make it a better thing that we can all use in our day-to-day. But it's the way that I came through. There was a bit of a journey with code triage this time last year, in fact, actually just going and starting doing little tiny bits of code every day. And open source isn't that scary when you get into it. So my talk's kind of about that journey in a way, and actually sort of how I went from being no one to working on this tool all the time, and just the sort of things we come across. What's scary, what's not, and realise that actually there's a lot of things that open source projects experience repeatedly, things you don't think about as an individual developer that suddenly you have to think about when you start running on lots of people's machines and not just the few in your office that are probably identical. It's just kind of taking it from there, and they're mostly RSpec stories, and then there's some fun bits at the end.
So obviously this has been quite a big year for RSpec as a project. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So version 2 was kind of the first stable release of RSpec. It's been around 6 years or something like that now. It's the version 1 was kind of hacky and thrown together, and most of it was thrown out and rebuilt for version 2, and that's when it became a serious tool. Version 3 is about fixing a lot of the stuff that we got wrong, throwing some of the bathwater out with the baby, that way around, why not? And actually just trying to make the changes we need to make for the next couple of years, because we follow Semver, so we can't make breaking changes. We can add lots of functionality, like we've added the new expect syntax as a result of some bugs we've encountered. But to kind of take the next steps and things, it's like, okay, well, let's release version 3 and have some breaking changes. I think we may well end up with a smaller release cycle between 3 and 4, because we've already started talking about, well, we'd like to remove that in 4. We're already get to that point. But we're trying to make the upgrade process nice for everyone, so 3 is still very much lots of things thrown out, but you won't notice a lot of things.
There was obviously some contention around the expect syntax. Some people feel like things have gotten missing in that. Obviously, expect syntax isn't deprecated. The should syntax isn't deprecated any longer, although there was plans for that.
We talked about it for about 5 minutes, and suddenly everyone got the wrong idea. It's like, oh no, they're removing it. It's like, well, no, we're not. By default, you have to tell us you're using it, or we give you a deprecation warning. And a lot of people are reading that as that syntax is deprecated and going away. There are currently no plans to remove it. We'd like to, but that's different to actually planning to do it. We're just kind of seeing how many people switch over, and if no one does, there'll be 2 syntaxes. You will run into the problems that should eventually cause this. We prefer you to write expect.
What do you say to people who feel like some of the expressiveness of RSpec is gone in moving away from should, that it feels like you're just making assertions now?
Well, expect and should are still roughly similar in terms of grammatical sense. It's not like you're doing assert 2 values. You are still doing sentences with your matches. And in a way, you can come up with some nicer sentences. And they're a bit more verbose. A lot of people have been criticising us for, well, this is nowhere near as terse as it used to be. And I kind of want to just say, well, it's RSpec. It was never terse. It's always been wordier than the equivalent in test unit or mini test. That's kind of not what we are. We're kind of about descriptive. We do think about the language we use. We've removed some of the terseness, again, with stub, for example. We used to be able to pass a hash in and go, well, key value, return values. We don't allow you to do that anymore, because we now use receive message and receive messages. Receive and receive messages. It's a bit more verbose, but it's more clear in your intention. And it allows us to do some niceness under the hood in terms of how things are wired. So there's going to be more of that. And we're actually introducing composable matches in RSpec 3, which is a feature some people won't have seen, which actually allows you to chain matches together with and or, and it's the kind of things that, so you expect one thing to be this and to be that. That's not something that's quite so readable with should, but it does work well with expect.
Interesting. Now, I mean, the interesting thing that I've observed with test unit and probably more recently mini tests to RSpec is that you tend to use less lines somehow with RSpec. I don't quite understand how. I tend to use less lines with RSpec, but they tend to be longer.
In RSpec?
In RSpec.
Well, that's partly because the expect syntax does add. Someone did some measurements, and it's up to 14 characters per line. Someone was giving me that statistic. It's like, I don't really care. Most of my tests still fit under 80 characters long for the reference, for the record, the metric. But we do a lot of work in allowing you to share setup. And as much as some people don't like using lets, they do allow you to have bunch of stuff set up lazily to be evaluated, and we do a bit more sugar than billion test. I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons why people use it, is that sugar.
Cool. Well, I look forward to hearing your stories, and for the lights to, turn off randomly. We've been too still. And I suppose I'll see you at the conference.
I hope so.